Hey everyone, I'm Richard, and this is Grey Wizard Gaming, and this is another 5 strategy video. In this one, I am talking about crawling chaos. Now, I've said this before, this is one of my favorite factions. Nyarlathotep is the probably the most famous great old one other than Cthulhu. A lot of people don't realize it though, because writers like Stephen King have referenced Nyarlathotep in their books. So Randall Flagg in The Stand or The Dark Tower, and I think in some of the other Stephen King books, he at one point in The Stand. Now, number one, if you read a lot of Stephen King, you know that The Dark Tower and The Stand, like those are like the same person, and you're like, get it, right? You get like, oh, this is a shared universe, kind of like Lovecraft, because that's what inspired Stephen King. But then in The Stand, he lists all these names. And one of the names, in addition to like Beelzebub and they, whatever, he's like, I am Nyarlathotep. Mind blown. And that, I mean, I read that when I was like 14, 15, somewhere around there. And it stuck with me. Like it stuck with me before I knew who Nyarlathotep was, which is kind of cool. All right. So tip number 1. You can fly. I shouldn't have to say that. This shouldn't be tip number 1. But I feel like Crawling Chaos players, they use fly, but they still think about themselves as terrestrial beings. So number 1, you have to get very comfortable with the fact that the globe is round. And as it being round, it wraps. And you know what the first question that everybody says after I say that when I'm teaching someone? Does it wrap the other way? No, you can't. Like, while you can go from Japan to California, you can't go from the North Pole to the South Pole without skipping like all the other stuff in the way. I don't get that. I don't know. But you can fly. And so, for example, in this 3-player setup, you can easily go to North America and set up your second home base, right? So I don't know why per se, but I will see Crawling Chaos players really just spread like anybody else. In Yellow Sign, it's like, well, where does Yellow Sign go? Well, they go to Scandinavia in a 5-player, 4-player game. That's just what they do. You can fly. You have to use it because you want to predate upon your enemies and you want them not to be able to like encroach upon you. So you can fly. All right, that was tip number 1. Tip number 2, flying polyps are the real MVP. These guys, I cannot go on and on enough about these guys. They are amazing. Once you get their spellbook, of course. They're still decent. I mean, cost 2, combat 1. I mean, they're still a decent unit. But once you get invisibility, and I've seen people play multiple games and never understand what it is that they really do, right? Select one monster or cultist from either faction per flying polyp present and exempted. The selected unit takes no part in the rest of the battle. So I don't know that it always said from either faction, but I think they had to say it regardless, because even that's not enough, because I'm making this video and I'm making this tip right here. Either faction, like using flying polyps to take away defenses for Nyarlathotep, that's great. because you select. That's the important thing. Most of the powers you don't get to choose. The controller gets to choose. In this scenario, you get to choose. So sure, flying polyps can make themselves exempt. Now they're not in the combat. You can never eliminate a flying polyp from a zone, or you can't easily do it if he doesn't want to. He'll just always say, I'm exempt, so you can't kill me in the combat. Of course, he can still be targeted by sleeper if he's going to be captured as a monster or whatever. But for the most part, flying polyps are very much able to control their fate. Also, if you need to protect something else, you can protect something else. Also, if somebody comes in with a big monster, like a Yothan, right? A Yothan is 7 combat dice. And they're like, I'm going to kill Nyarlathotep. Oh, but you're exempt. So now we're going to kill your, whatever other things they brought with them. And your Yothan's just going to sit around. Good luck. I'm glad you wasted that power, right? They had to spend a power to initiate combat, and you're just like, sorry. So primarily I use flying polyps as a defensive creature. They're a very powerful defensive unit that makes it very expensive to attack me. However, you can go in with a squad of flying polyps and exempt a bunch of units to make way for Nyarlathotep to assassinate. So if you have enough power, you got lucky on a roll, 1,000 forms, whatever, flying polyps in a squad, it can be good to deal with troublesome things. All right. Tip number 3, use madness wisely, but often. So madness, number 1, you get to choose which adjacent area enemy units flee to on a pain result. This happens even in battles to which you do not participate. This is one of the rare scenarios where Black Goat and Crawling Chaos can synergize a little bit, and you can really tear somebody else apart. Whether this is you targeting the ancients and separating their mindless who need units to control them from the other units, and now they're just like abandoned. They can't do anything with them unless they're going to spend a lot of power to move units in just to move them out, or if they're going to use dematerialize, or, and this is much better, their pained great old ones suddenly find themselves alone. Oh no. Their alone great old ones now can be picked on. And that doesn't matter if it's Shub-Niggurath, that doesn't matter if it is Hastur. You've just isolated their great old one, and now you killed their great old one. Obviously, you have to be careful with Hastur because he can still kill Nyarlathotep no matter what. But a particularly troublesome great old one, it can create a target, and that target can expose them because your thing is harbinger. We'll talk about that in a bit. All right. Other options for madness is to negotiate with someone and then move their units, maybe move their cultists. Now their cultists can be captured. You'd be like, hey, I'm going to move a bunch of cultists into your space and you can eat them. Things like that. That's where the ghouls with necrophagy really can amplify your ability. On the other hand, don't use madness if it doesn't serve a purpose. And I say that because you really, a big part of any strategic game is dealing with humans, or it should be. And as part of that, I think being too abusive can make people hate Crawling Chaos and hate them enough that they would rather you lose than they win. And I see that a lot. I see that a lot where people are just like, tear down Crawling Chaos after we've, made him last place, then we'll figure out who can win. It's obnoxious, but that means you were too abusive, and try not to do that. All right. Tip number 4, protect Nyarlathotep. So Um, if you don't let him die, he will give you power via thousand forms. He can give you power via harbinger. You need to protect him. Um, I I don't know how many times I've seen him go in and attack a great old one because they want harbinger, and they didn't bring in protection because they were greedy, right? You're greedy when you say, "Well, I'll get lucky." I hate dice. I hate dice. They I love dice and I hate dice. If you plan on being lucky, you should plan on being unlucky. And it doesn't matter the odds. If they have 2 dice, there's a chance that they can kill you. And of course, hopefully, you have immortality. Emissary of the Outer Gods. Unless an older enemy great old one is involved in the battle, any kill inflicted in Nyarlathotep becomes a pain, blah, blah, whatever. Yeah, sure, you should have that, so you should be safe. And then you should have madness, so you can control where you escape to, all that kind of stuff. Man, I've seen Nyarlathotep killed so many times, more than anybody else, because I feel like other people, they summon their great old one, and maybe they don't even want to go into combat. Shub-Niggurath doesn't want to go into combat. Shub-Niggurath wants to avatar around and capture things. She doesn't want to really fight because she's also at risk if she dies, and it's bad news for that faction. Man, Nyarlathotep, he needs to fight. He specifically needs to fight great old ones, the only people who can kill him. So protect him, keep him safe, make sure that you get the power back, either by thousand forms, which you have no control of, so you can't rely on it. I'm a firm believer you can't rely on thousand forms. So, since you can't rely on it, what can you rely on? You can rely on harbinger. So power equal to half the cost to awaken him. Unfortunately, a lot of other great old ones are cheap. So, I mean, cheap in various ways. So that is what it is. But usually those ones you want elder signs. That is your thing. That's how you win, is elder signs through harbinger. Don't be afraid to get the power. Don't be afraid to get a high priest. High priest opens a lot of things for you. You can get a high priest first turn. You can get Nyarlathotep second turn, and you can use thousand forms second turn. Hopefully, after everyone is out of power, using your high priest to guarantee that you get that power, and then you can still a gate. So now hopefully you started and kept 2 gates second turn with Nyarlathotep and a high priest. Then you still a 3rd gate using thousand forms by sacrificing your high priest second turn. 3rd turn you're good because you started out with 3 power. You have thousand forms to hold on to. You as your action paying for power. That also spins your wheels a little bit so that Nyarlathotep can do his stuff at the end, right? So keep him safe, protect Nyarlathotep, protect the world, something like that. I don't know, cheerleader? I don't know, whatever. Tip number 5, harbinger at all costs. I just said protect Nyarlathotep. I'm really meaning when you're near the end of the game, you should be harbingering. There is no reason to end the game with Nyarlathotep alive. So if you can harbinger and you can get the elder signs, and then you can trigger the end of the game that way, then you're that much better off, right? So the end of the game, absolutely harbinger until he's dead. You still should bring somebody to protect him often, because those people that protect him also might be able to bring in combat dice to help make sure that you pain or otherwise, get your harbinger effect for a great old one. But also, I think there are other times in the game where you have a choice, and if you have a choice of getting one more gate or one more harbinger, and it's safe, I would often choose harbinger because an elder sign is an average of 1.5 doom points, and a gate is only worth 1 doom point. You have to keep in mind, are you going to do a ritual of annihilation? If you are, then that ritual of annihilation is going to make it so that you got 2 doom points plus an elder sign, but for the gate. If you're going to do if you're going to do a ritual anyways, and you only had 1 gate plus an elder sign, plus you got a second point, plus you got a second elder sign because you did a ritual, you're 1 point down. But you're actually an elder sign up, which is better. You'd always rather have an elder sign over a point. And I think that's hard for some people to like think about. Now, your power short. So that's the problem, right? Because you would have had 1 more power plus 1 more point if you had elder signed. If you'd gated and then did a ritual. But that's where you really have to keep your eye on the tempo of the game. Harbinger can give you power, and if that power can set you up for another Harbinger because somebody's exposed, you've basically just maybe you pained them somewhere. Maybe your Harbinger is going to take them down from first place to second place, and you've pushed them into another threat, right? You've pushed their cultists so they're going to get eaten up by another faction, whatever. All these things, Harbinger is powerful, and you should be pushing to Harbinger over a lot of other things, in my opinion. So with that, love to see your strategies down below. There is a very entertaining BGD thread about whether Crawling Chaos can compete after 4 players, so 5+ players. And there was a guy who was very adamant that Crawling Chaos can't compete at 5 or plus players. I see what he's saying. I mean, he can, but it can be hard. So hard that they win less often at more numbers of players. I think if you have high priests, then you can very reliably get 1,000 forms to activate. And if you can get 1,000 forms through sacrificing your high priest, you have a viable strategy to continually summon a high priest, sacrifice the high priest the next turn. You will always end up with a neutral power balance, and you will likely have 1,000 forms. Now, the counter to that is people can threaten your high priest, forcing you to sacrifice him early, and then that means you're not likely to get your 1,000 forms, but you're still not down on power, and you're possibly up on power depending on whether you get 1,000 forms off. So by all means, I love high priests. I might start sending out high priestess prizes or something because you guys need them. You guys need them if you don't have them already. All right, with that, comment down below your comments, strategies, and
turn around. I can't see your face. Tell me, where did you go? Was it something I did, something I said that made it all fall down? Baby, I need to know, 'cause I'm losing my faith, and the more I give, the less I get.